The Weimar Republic, A Precarious Peace, written by Ian Kershaw. Germany in the 1920s grappled with defeat. The Treaty of Versailles imposed harsh penalties. The economy was in shambles. Hyperinflation crippled the middle class. Extremist groups battled in the streets. The Nazi Party found fertile ground. The Great Depression dealt a devastating blow. Into this vacuum stepped Adolf Hitler. He promised to restore Germany to its former glory. The rise of the Nazi Party, a promise of order. The Nazi Party grew rapidly in the early 1930s. Economic hardship played a key role. Many Germans were drawn to Hitler's promises. The Nazis capitalized on fear of communism. Hitler was a master propagandist. He understood the power of spectacle and emotion. Nazi rallies stirred up nationalist sentiment. The party used modern technology to spread its message. They created a vast network of party organizations. The Nazis were ruthless in their pursuit of power. They used intimidation and violence to silence opponents. By 1933, the Nazi Party had become the largest political force in Germany. The allure of Nazi ideology, propaganda and persuasion. Central to the Nazi rise was their ideology. This was a toxic brew of nationalism, racism and anti-Semitism. It glorified the German nation and promised to restore it to its rightful place in the world. The Nazis promoted the idea of a master race, the Aryans, destined to rule over inferior peoples. They scapegoated Jews, blaming them for Germany's problems and portraying them as a threat to the nation's purity. Propaganda was skillfully used to disseminate this ideology. Joseph Goebbels, the Minister of Propaganda, controlled all aspects of media and culture. Newspapers, radio and film were used to spread Nazi messages. Books deemed subversive were burned. Artists and intellectuals who did not conform were silenced. Education was also manipulated to indoctrinate young minds. Textbooks were rewritten to glorify the Nazi regime and instill its ideology. Children were enrolled in the Hitler Youth and the League of German Girls, where they were subjected to intense ideological training and physical conditioning. The Nazis aimed to create a generation completely loyal to the Führer and the Nazi state. The impact on daily life, conformity and control. Life under Nazi rule changed dramatically. The regime quickly moved to consolidate its power and crush any form of opposition. The Enabling Act of 1933 gave Hitler dictatorial powers. Political parties were banned. Trade unions were abolished. Freedom of speech, press and assembly were suppressed. The Gestapo, the secret police, instilled fear and enforced conformity. Daily life became increasingly regimented. The Nazis promoted traditional gender roles, urging women to focus on children, kitchen and church. They controlled all aspects of culture, from art and literature to music and film. Jazz and other forms of degenerate art were banned. Books by Jewish authors or deemed critical of the regime were burned. Section 5. Economic recovery, the price of progress. One area where the Nazis did achieve tangible results was the economy. Hitler had inherited a country in the grip of the Great Depression. Millions were unemployed. The Nazis implemented a program of public works, rearmament, and autarky, which means economic self-sufficiency. They built highways, dams, and other infrastructure projects. This created jobs and stimulated the economy. The Nazis also reintroduced conscription and began a massive rearmament program. This further reduced unemployment and boosted industries related to war production. The regime implemented policies designed to achieve autarky, reducing dependence on foreign imports. While these policies had some success, they came at a cost. The Nazis' economic policies were unsustainable in the long run. They were geared towards war preparation, not long-term economic stability. The regime suppressed labor unions and silenced any dissent. Workers had little power to negotiate wages or working conditions. The focus on rearmament diverted resources from consumer goods, leading to shortages and rationing. Section 6. Social engineering, creating the ideal Aryan society. The Nazis were obsessed with creating a racially pure and healthy German nation. They implemented social policies to promote Aryan values and eliminate undesirable elements. This included promoting large families, discouraging smoking and alcohol, and encouraging fitness. The Nazis were fixated on eugenics, improving the human race through selective breeding. They passed laws for forced sterilization of the hereditarily unfit. This included those with mental illness, disabilities, and hereditary diseases. The Nazis believed these measures were necessary to prevent degeneration. They controlled reproduction, promoting Aryan ideals and discouraging mixed-race relationships. Encouraging marriage and childbirth among racially valuable Germans, they offered financial incentives. They sought to limit the birth rate among undesirable groups. These policies profoundly impacted millions, forcing conformity or facing severe consequences. Section 7. The shadows of persecution, targeting undesirables. While some Germans experienced economic benefits, the Nazi regime unleashed a reign of terror against those deemed enemies of the state. This included political opponents, Jews, Roma, Gypsies, homosexuals, Jehovah's Witnesses, and anyone deemed asocial or undesirable. These groups were subjected to persecution, imprisonment, and murder. The persecution of Jews was particularly systematic and brutal. The Nazis enacted a series of anti-Semitic laws that stripped Jews of their citizenship, livelihoods, and basic rights. Jewish businesses were boycotted and confiscated. Jewish children were expelled from schools. Synagogues were burned. The persecution culminated in the Holocaust, the systematic genocide of 6 million Jews. Jews were rounded up and deported to concentration camps and extermination camps, where they were murdered in gas chambers, worked to death, or died from starvation, disease, and abuse. The Holocaust was a crime of unprecedented barbarity, a chilling reminder of the dangers of unchecked hatred and totalitarian regimes. Section 8. The Road to War, Expansionism and Destruction. From its inception, the Nazi regime had aggressive expansionist ambitions. Hitler believed that Germany needed Lebensraum, living space, in the East. He aimed to conquer territory in Eastern Europe and Russia to provide land and resources for the German people. This expansionist drive, combined with Hitler's fanatical ideology, led to the outbreak of World War II in 1939. Germany's initial military successes brought further hardship to occupied populations. The Nazis exploited the resources and labor of conquered territories, further fueling their war machine. However, the tide of the war eventually turned against Germany. The Allied bombing campaign devastated German cities, causing widespread destruction and civilian casualties. The war brought unimaginable suffering to Germany. Millions of German soldiers were killed or wounded. Cities were reduced to rubble. The economy was shattered. The Nazi regime, which had promised to restore Germany to greatness, had instead led the country to ruin. The legacy of Nazi rule would haunt Germany for generations to come. Section 9. The Legacy of Nazi Rule, a Nation Scarred. The defeat of Nazi Germany in 1945 marked the end of a dark chapter in human history. The country lay in ruins, both physically and morally. The full horrors of the Holocaust were revealed to the world, leaving an indelible stain on Germany's conscience. The legacy of Nazi rule continues to shape German society to this day. Germany has made remarkable strides in confronting its past. The country has acknowledged its responsibility for the crimes of the Nazi regime and has paid reparations to victims. It has implemented educational programs to ensure that future generations learn from the mistakes of the past. However, the legacy of Nazi rule continues to cast a long shadow. The rise of the Nazi Party serves as a chilling reminder of the fragility of democracy and the dangers of unchecked extremism. It highlights the importance of vigilance, tolerance, and the protection of human rights. It is a lesson that must never be forgotten. Section 10. Conclusion. A complex and tragic history. The Nazi era was a complex and tragic period in German history. It was a time of both progress and devastation, of economic recovery and genocide, of national pride and utter shame. The Nazi regime, with its seductive promises and brutal reality, left an indelible mark on Germany and the world. While some Germans may have experienced improvements in their lives under Nazi rule, these were overshadowed by the regime's crimes against humanity. The persecution, suffering, and loss of life inflicted by the Nazis cannot be justified or forgotten. The Nazi era stands as a stark warning about the dangers of totalitarian ideologies and the importance of safeguarding human rights and democratic values.